Good afternoon and welcome to IBA News this Sunday, the 6th of November. I'm Elon Aslan-Levy, joining you live from Jerusalem. Security forces this morning arrested a 36-year-old Palestinian woman in Jerusalem's Old City, suspected of plotting a stabbing attack against Israelis. During a search in her home, forces found 2 knives she allegedly planned to use in the attack alongside a Quran. Over the weekend, Palestinian security forces thwarted a large-scale bomb attack against IDF forces deployed at a checkpoint in Hebron. Palestinian security officials tipped Israel off about the 12-kilogram bomb attached to a gas cylinder and placed on the Palestinian side of a checkpoint in the divided West Bank city. A Palestinian suspect was arrested and IDF sappers carried out a controlled explosion. Separately, police have arrested 21 Palestinians, including 16 minors, suspected of involvement in disturbances around the Rachel's Tomb compound in recent months. The group is suspected of throwing firebombs, setting fireworks and hurling rocks. The detainees are all residents of the nearby Al-Ida refugee camp, and they allegedly learnt on the internet how to prepare their explosive devices. Well, at this morning's cabinet meeting, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu raised the US presidential elections, but avoided comment on the 2 issues bedeviling his own government, namely the future of the outpost of Amona and of public broadcasting. Our political correspondent is here with the details. Kalev.
Thanks, Elon. Supporters of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump both claim their candidates will be better for Israel. But Prime Minister Netanyahu told his ministers today that no matter who is chosen as the next U.S. president this week, he is certain the American-Israeli alliance will remain strong. The Prime Minister added his hope that the next U.S. administration will also continue the policy that the solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict can only come about via direct negotiations without preconditions between the two sides, and won't be decided by the United Nations or other international bodies. This an apparent reference to reports that the Obama administration is considering whether to support a UN resolution that would outline the contours of a final status agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. Today's cabinet session focused solely on the government's plan to promote smart transportation and fuel alternatives to gasoline. Missing from the minister's agenda was discussion over the future of Amona, after Netanyahu requested a week's delay to discuss a proposed law that would enable the disputed settlement outpost to remain in place, despite the Supreme Court ruling that it must be evacuated by December 25th because it was built on private Palestinian land. Approving the so-called Arrangements Bill, which would authorize the government to appropriate Palestinian property, would put Netanyahu in conflict with Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit, who opposes the law. The Prime Minister has asked the High Court to delay the Amona evacuation for at least 8 months, and also may be hoping to delay at least until next summer what is sure to be a contentious debate within his coalition. The Prime Minister is also avoiding comment on the Israel Public Broadcasting Corporation, known in Hebrew as the Tagid, until he gets the report due in 3 weeks from a panel he appointed to study the issue. According to Channel 2, the panel has also raised the possibility of closing down both the Tagid and the Israel Broadcasting Authority, which includes this news broadcast. Speaking out on the issue is Likud lawmaker David Beaton, who has introduced a bill to shut down the Tagid. He said yesterday he has been monitoring Facebook posts from the Tagid's top management and journalists that prove they are anti-government leftists. Beaton's remarks were condemned as McCarthyism and KGB tactics by opposition lawmakers. Elon.
Kalev, thank you. President Rivlin has come out in strong support for the Israel Broadcasting Authority, praising it for continuing to produce quality programs despite the long threat of liquidation and closure. The president made the remarks at the weekend premiere of the 15-part Channel 1 series And the Country Was in Chaos, which traces the history of the Holy Land and begins tonight at 9 o'clock on Israel Television's Channel 1. Noting the political chaos over the future of public broadcasting, the president said he appreciated the employees of the IBA for adhering to the broadcaster's goals, no matter what happens. Tens of thousands gathered last night in Tel Aviv's Rabin Square for a memorial rally honoring slain Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin 21 years after his assassination. The Labour Party assumed responsibility for the event this year after the earlier announcement that it would be cancelled due to a lack of funds. Addressing the crowd, opposition head Isaac Herzog accused the Prime Minister of waging a war on democracy, in light of which the time for a possible unity government, he said, was over. Herzog charged that right-wing parties are today allowing the same incitement and hatred that led to Rabin's murder. Both Zionist Union MK Tzipi Livni and Meretz chairwoman Zahava Gal'on said they came to prevent the shaming and persecution of journalists, officers and judges, but primarily to prevent the next political murder. Just before the rally, Yuval Rabin described his father's assassination as a promo for the horror film we are currently living in. Absent from the rally were members of the coalition and Yesh Atid, who rejected an invitation to speak. Well, just hours before that rally, Likud MK David Beaton sparked controversy again, saying that the Rabin assassination was not a political murder. Speaking at a cultural event in Holon ahead of the Rabin memorial, Beaton insisted that Rabin was not murdered by politicians and therefore they should not be held responsible. Sources close to the Prime Minister today denounced Beaton's remarks. They said Netanyahu believes that the murder was unequivocally of a political nature and that he adamantly rejects the claims of his coalition chairman. Netanya Mayor Miriam Fireberg was questioned once again by the police anti-fraud unit in Lod today over a series of corruption allegations. An injunction barring the mayor from City Hall is set to expire on Monday, and the court is due to consider a police request to extend the order. The Netanya Mayor is suspected of accepting millions of shekels in bribes, as well as granting special favors through her son and former husband in exchange for advancing developers' real estate interests in the coastal city. While sticking with corruption, the Prime Minister's office has called for a worldwide ban on trading in binary options following an intensive campaign by the Times of Israel against what it calls a fraudulent industry. Over 7 months, the Times of Israel has published dozens of articles exposing the unscrupulous practices by which savers are enticed with offers of profitable short-term investments, and ultimately, most of them lose all or most of their money. The Times of Israel estimates there are over 100 binary options companies in Israel, fleecing foreigners of their cash and provoking investigations in multiple countries on behalf of their citizens. It has been illegal since March for Israeli binary options firms to target Israelis, but now the chairman of the Israel Securities Authority, Shmuel Hauser, is seeking expanded powers from the Attorney General in order to bar binary option sales to foreigners, effectively shutting the whole industry here in Israel. Well, joining me now in the studio is Simona Weinglass, who together with editor David Horowitz has been leading that Times of Israel investigation into binary options. Simona, welcome.
Pleasure.
How does this whole binary options business work?
Okay, so binary options is a legitimate trading tool. It's an exotic option, and there are banks that offer it, and there are various companies that offer it. But as it operates in Israel, it's largely fraudulent, and the way it works is an investor, someone is called on the telephone, and they're offered the opportunity to invest in what's called a binary option, and it's whether the value of an asset, say gold, or the price or a currency will go up or down. If they are correct, then they get about 70% of their money, and if they're wrong, then they lose the money they put on that bet. What's happening though is much of this industry, as it operates in Israel, is actually fraudulent. Not only will customers lose their money over time, but often the platforms that provide the binary options are rigged. So basically, I've been told something like 98 to 99% of customers lose most or all of their money, and that's in the majority of companies.
I mean, that sounds awful enough, but what's the absolute worst thing you've discovered in the course of your investigation?
Well, the absolute worst thing, when I first started investigating, I thought, okay, there are people being scammed out of $250, $1,000, but I've spoken to people, and it's not a few people, who've lost their life savings. Elderly people who have nothing to live on, who don't have money to heat their homes. I spoke to a woman who wanted to commit suicide. I've heard of people who have committed suicide. So there seems to be no limit on how much money some of these companies are willing to take from a person.
I mean, why here in Israel? How did we get to a situation where the government let an unregulated business spin so clearly out of control?
Well, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. I ask myself that question all the time. I think there's just a lack of law enforcement. It started about 7 or 8 years ago is when binary options started. Forex started a little bit before that. And I would say this is the underbelly of the high-tech nation, so of the startup nation. So we have this high-tech expertise here in Israel. I think there's also the money laundering aspect where it's a little bit easier to launder money here perhaps than in other places. And
I mean, has the government been ignorant of this? Has it been turning a blind eye? Corrupt interests? I mean, the government can't have been completely unaware that this was going on.
So I ask myself that question often because the government hasn't been ignorant of this at all. For instance, last year, a man by the name of Aviv Talmor, who owned several Forex and binary options brands, was arrested. And he was arrested, and you would have expected that once his case was investigated, the whole thing would unravel because there wasn't just one Aviv Talmor, there are hundreds of Aviv Talmors. And yet it just remained that there was one man who had done this crime, and the rest of the industry continued on as usual. So I don't know, and maybe there's corruption involved, maybe there's just a kind of, it's a very complicated crime to crack.
Is it a question of, what we call in Israel kastach, that every agency says someone else is responsible and it just falls between the cracks?
There's an aspect of that. So I don't know. I wouldn't jump to conclusions that there's corruption involved, but there's some sort of failure of law enforcement.
Briefly, what is the Times of Israel hoping to achieve with this investigation so we can wrap up and move on?
So we can wrap up and move on. I mean, this is a really big story, and there are aspects of it that have yet to be unraveled. What we hope to achieve, we want to alert the public to what's going on, and there remains more to be exposed. And we hope that law enforcement will do something about it, although our job is just to let the public become aware.
Simona, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
In Herat, western Afghanistan, the Jewish cemetery is all that remains of a once thriving community, and it's currently being refurbished. IBA's Margot Dudkevich has the story.
In the heart of a Muslim neighborhood deep inside enemy country, nestled among the mosques, lies the remains of an old Jewish cemetery, testament to the once thriving Jewish community that resided in Herat, in western Afghanistan, a time when the family's patriarchs traveled back and forth on trading trips from the Afghan border city, moving between Iran, Afghanistan, India and Central Asia on the ancient Silk Road. Avraham, who asked that his true identity be concealed, decided to refurbish the old Jewish cemetery in Herat that has suffered from years of neglect, its tombstones buried under piles of rubble, others smashed beyond recognition and left in a state of disrepair.
This is the last person that been died here, died by tragic way by the local people. He had been buried by the Muslim. He had nobody to say for him Kaddish.
He was born in Herat and now lives abroad. Renovating the old Jewish cemetery has become his life's mission, and he travels frequently to Afghanistan to oversee the work. In recent months, Avraham has visited the site a number of times to inspect the progress made by the Muslim laborers working there.
Work at the last few days. Looks like we got some progress here. We got thousands of bricks. I have today about more than 30 people working here.
No one is left to visit the some 2,000 graves in the cemetery, many more than 500 years old, with only 200 having been identified. Avram says he's in contact with key people in Herat to ensure that the work at the cemetery continues unhampered.
Isha Bashem, Marat, Michal, Bat Yarob, Yerutiel, Tintzaba, Adar.
Jews resided in Afghanistan for more than 1,500 years. Many immigrated to Israel and the United States. Today, some 10,000 Jews of Afghan descent live in Israel. In Kabul, only one Jew remains, Zebulun Simantov, a carpet trader who is caretaker of the only synagogue in the Afghan capital. Margaret Utkevich, IBA News.
The US presidential election has entered its final stretch with just 2 days to go before America decides whether Democrat Hillary Clinton or Republican Donald Trump will take up residence in the White House. Kalev Ben-David brings the latest from the campaign trail.
It was a frightening moment for Donald Trump as Secret Service agents hustled the Republican candidate off the stage in Colorado after someone yelled out "gun" during a scuffle in the crowd. But it turned out to be a false alarm, as protester Austin Kreitz, who was holding up a sign saying "Republicans against Trump," was found to be unarmed.
Well, I'm actually a Republican, so I'm a Republican and have been supporting Republican candidates for quite some time, but I just don't support Donald Trump.
Trump does have real reason to be concerned after the latest ABC TV Washington Post national poll had him trailing behind Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton by 5 points with just 2 days to go before Election Day. Trump urged his supporters to get out to the polling stations on Tuesday.
If you haven't mailed in your ballot, don't do that. Bring it. Bring it. Take it to the drop box in your county. Don't put it in the mail. I know everybody says how honest everything is with our political system, but we all know better.
Clinton, in the meantime, continued to draw on celebrity supporters, appearing with pop star Katy Perry in Philadelphia and Beyoncé and Jay-Z in Ohio.
I was thrilled when our incredible guest tonight came out and started campaigning for me way back in Iowa before the caucuses, because I love the message. When you get knocked down, which everybody does, what matters is get back up.
African-American turnout at the polls will be crucial for Clinton on Election Day. If the numbers match up to the two elections that put Barack Obama in the White House, Clinton will be following him there this week. And if not, Donald Trump will pull off one of the greatest upsets in the history of American politics. This is Kalev Ben-David for IBA News.
Well, as America prepares to go to the polls at very long last, here are 5 Jewish interest election stories from over the weekend. 1. Lagging behind in the polls, the Trump campaign is seeking all the help it can get. Last night, Ivanka Trump and husband Jared Kushner visited the grave of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in New York for a pre-election prayer. 2. Haredi Weekly Mishpacha has printed a picture of Hillary Clinton on its cover. The photo, albeit in negative exposure, is believed to be the first ever photograph of a woman in a Haredi publication. 3. Donald Trump's latest election ad is being accused of anti-Semitic overtones, as the GOP nominee warns about those who control the levers of power in Washington and global special interests. The ad shows billionaire George Soros and Federal Reserve Chairwoman Janet Yellen, both Jews. 4. In a Louisiana Republican primary debate for the Senate, former KKK Grand Wizard David Duke took to the stage to spout anti-Semitism.
And there is a problem in America with a very strong, powerful tribal group that dominates our media and dominates our international banking. I'm not opposed to all Jews. I think there's a lot of great Jews. In fact, a lot of Jews I honor. But let me tell you something. I'm against Jews or anybody else that puts the interest of some other place, another country, over our own country, that is controlling and dominating the media, which is teaching black people and inspiring black people to hate white people and inciting them to violence.
And finally, with nerves fraying, the Rabbinical Assembly of the U.S. conservative movement has released a prayer in anticipation of a U.S. election. Help us to recognize the gift of our vibrant and open democracy and the responsibility to nurture it, writes Rabbi Julie Schonfeld. May we strive to care about those with whom we disagree as dearly as we care about our own ideals. More tragedy on the nation's roads. 2 18-year-olds were killed and 4 injured in a full frontal collision between a private car and a bus at the Uza junction on Highway 40 near Kiryat Gat last night. According to a preliminary investigation, the private car veered into the opposite lane for reasons that remain unclear, crashing head-on into the bus. Emergency crews and firefighters worked to extricate 2 motorists trapped inside the vehicle, but they were pronounced dead at the scene. Since the beginning of the year, 321 people have been killed in traffic-related accidents. The Egged Bus Company announced it is cancelling tomorrow's nationwide strike after an agreement was reached between the Histadrut Workers' Union and the Finance Ministry. According to reports, the Finance Ministry has agreed to transfer some 150 million shekels so the company will be able to pay bus drivers' wages and will continue to negotiate a permanent wage agreement. Last week, hundreds of bus drivers went on strike, leaving thousands of passengers stranded. The drivers demanded the government renew its assistance to the company, which expired a year ago, leaving the cooperative short on cash, it says, to remunerate drivers and improve services. Well, it wouldn't be Sunday without our Sunday tradition, so here are 5 good news stories to welcome in the new week. Israel has been ranked the 2nd most innovative country in the world by Business Insider, coming just behind Switzerland. Jerusalem's botanical gardens win global acclaim as its Israeli co-founders travel to international conferences to speak about public gardens as forces for social empowerment. An Israeli film has been nominated for the Oscar Awards in the short documentary category. The movie The Mute's House, entered by Jerusalem's Sam Spiegel Film and Television School, tells the story of a Palestinian child living with his deaf mother near the Jewish quarter in Hebron. A joint Jewish-Arab women's choir from Jaffa wins an international award. The Rana Choir, comprising Jewish women and Jewish, Muslim and Christian women, received the Hrant Dink Foundation Award in Turkey. The foundation awards people and organizations that promote coexistence and combat discrimination, racism and violence. And finally, an American Hasidic mohel resuscitated an Arab woman who collapsed on a transatlantic flight. The Kiryas Joel Hatzolah volunteer found a woman in a hijab to translate because the poorly Arab woman didn't speak English or Yiddish. In finance, the stock exchange starts the week on the up and no change in the currency markets as they're still closed for the weekend. And in weather, expect partly cloudy skies tomorrow and a slight rise in temperatures. And that's all for today. Ari O'Sullivan will be back tomorrow. Until then, it's a good evening and a Shavua Tov live from Jerusalem.